The CBS News Hour this evening is in two parts. The first part will be a special on Campaign 68, the Indiana primary with CBS News correspondent Walter Cronkite. The second part will be The Forgotten American with CBS News correspondent Joseph Benty. This evening's News Hour is brought to you by GAF, the people who make cameras, film, projectors, copying machines, building supplies, chemicals, stereo viewers, and a lot more.
Good evening. Well, Senator Robert Kennedy has won the first primary test in his attempt to secure the Democratic nomination for the presidency. With some 38% of the ballots counted in Indiana's primary today, Senator Kennedy has 41% of the vote, 136,000 votes. Governor Roger Brannigan, running as a favorite son, 29% or 97,000 votes. And Senator Eugene McCarthy, in his fifth primary test, 30% of the votes, or something over 100,000. CBS News' estimate of the final result, based on our sample precincts, shows Kennedy winning with 43% of the vote. Brannigan and McCarthy just about splitting the remainder of the votes. Brannigan perhaps a hair ahead with 29% and McCarthy 28% of the votes. On the Republican side, Richard Nixon was not opposed, and write-ins are not permitted in Indiana. He has some 209,000, is coming up to 210,000 votes with 38% of the vote counted, and looks like he's going on toward a record number of Republican votes in this primary. Vice President Humphrey was not on the Democratic side of the ballot. Governor Brannigan originally was a stand-in for President Johnson, but when President Johnson dropped out of the race, Brannigan stayed in as a favorite son to hold on to Indiana's 63 delegate votes at the Democratic Convention in Chicago. He did not declare as a stand-in for Hubert Humphrey. However, many of the prominent Democrats in Indiana who supported Brannigan, including organized labor in many areas, also supported Brannigan, and they are supporters of Hubert Humphrey. Let's check in now with our correspondents who have been traveling with the candidates during this Indiana campaign. Roger Mudd at Kennedy headquarters in Indianapolis. How did Kennedy do compared to his expectations?
Well, not as well as his expectations. He had hoped, I think, out of this three-man race to leave Indiana with a 50% plurality. He didn't get that, but he did succeed in knocking a couple notches into Gene McCarthy. This victory here has given him momentum to move on to Nebraska, the South Dakota, Oregon, and California primary. So I suppose under the circumstances, a three-way race in a state basically conservative, he is more than pleased with the results.
David Shoemaker at the McCarthy headquarters. Does Senator McCarthy figure that he was defeated by Kennedy tonight?
No, I wouldn't say that. Eugene McCarthy was hoping for 25% of the vote. He's done better than that, although anything less than 33% is going to make it difficult for him to raise money. Incidentally, Walter, you know, this has been dubbed by McCarthy's young supporters the Magical Mystery Tour, and his young supporters here are still hoping there'll be one more bit of magic.
John Hart's outside of the Democratic state headquarters in Indianapolis. John, what about Governor Brannigan? How does he look on this result tonight compared to expectations?
Well, Walter, to be easier to answer that, if Governor Brannigan were here, he's in Chicago at the moment making a speech. That's the kind of campaign he's been running. He did say today that he was going to win. He did not. It's been a comfortable campaign, and he wanted to be the Hoosier leading the Hoosiers to Chicago. He's not going to be.
Roger, what were the issues on which Kennedy won?
Well, I couldn't name them, really, because I don't think there were any great issues. Mostly it was personality, charisma, if you like, or the Kennedy magic. Listening to him last night on the television, you would have thought that Kennedy was a states' rights candidate, return government to the people and abolish welfare and replace it with jobs. Incidentally, as John and Dave were talking, the table full of Kennedy spokesmen just called the results tonight here an impressive victory for the senator. That's their latest word.
David, McCarthy's key issue, he had the teeth kind of pulled from it, didn't he, with the Vietnam peace move? What did he campaign on?
Walter, that was his first issue, and I think we've got to say that Eugene McCarthy does not make things easy for himself. First, the war when it was unpopular, Now he set about an examination of the whole processes of politics and governments, and that was particularly tough in this state of Indiana.
John Hart, Governor Brannigan had a little problem not being a really serious candidate for the presidency on this issues thing. What was the basis of his campaign?
Well, aside from the provincial appeal, Walter, he really was sort of a chummy down at the courthouse kind of campaign. He depended on this organization, which is one of the last in the United States to retain a large patronage system. He also had a big help from the Indianapolis Star, which favored him in their coverage and put front-page cartoons of the other candidates written in acid. He appeared to want to go to Chicago with chances of getting a better deal for Indiana politicians in the party.
Going to the Chicago convention, not to a speech tonight, that is.
That's right.
Roger, just one more thing. Did the charge that Senator Kennedy was spending vast amounts of money in Indiana, did that really hurt him?
Well, I guess it didn't. I think it probably further decreased his standing with those who were going to vote against him anyhow. Obviously, it didn't cut into him deeply here, but neither did his response when asked to reveal his expenditure dispel the idea around the country among the anti-Kennedy people that when a Kennedy runs, he does spend vast sums of money. And his refusal to release his statistics just heightened that impression.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll be back in a moment with more on Campaign 68, the Indiana primary.
These are Ruberoid vinyl floors. They look so beautiful because they look so real. They look so real because we make them a different way, with a process called gravure that reproduces a brick floor that looks like brick, a flagstone floor that looks like flagstone. In fact, we could make an authentic-looking vinyl floor out of anything that can be photographed. Anything.
GAF Ruberoid, the very authentic vinyl floors.
The GAF Anscomatic Super 8 movie camera has things maybe you don't need. It has a 6:1 zoom lens. Who needs that? It has instant slow motion. Who needs that? And it has automatic exposure control. And who needs that? The instant loading GAF Anscomatic has a lot of things that aren't necessary. Just nice. The people at GAF make cameras, film, building supplies, chemicals, copying machines, and a lot more.
With 40% of the vote in, Eugene McCarthy has some 30% of that vote in Indiana, and CBS News estimate is he'll end up with 28%. And David Shoemaker has been covering his campaign and is with him right now in Indianapolis. David? I can see on my monitor here that David Shoemaker and Senator McCarthy have just come into to our room at the McCarthy headquarters there in Indianapolis. And as soon as David gets his microphone connected around his neck there, I suppose we can go ahead. David, are you prepared?
Walter, I'm here, let's say. Senator McCarthy, looking at these returns now, what do they mean, both in Indiana and to the future of Eugene McCarthy?
Oh, I don't know what they mean to Indiana. It means that the Indiana delegation, I assume, but Chicago will be for Senator Kennedy on the first ballot. I don't know what they mean in terms of my future. I think we're doing very well here. It'd be interesting to see just where the returns came from, where my votes came from. If they establish what we've been establishing in all the other primaries, that I can get votes that no other Democratic candidate can get. I expect the results here, both in terms of the percentage and also in the source of the votes, would probably show me, as the recent polls have shown me, to be the strongest potential Democratic candidate for next November.
Well, Senator, when Robert Kennedy first entered this race, I recall asking you whether you could handle the Kennedy money and glamour and charisma. What's your answer to that question now?
Well, I don't know. If that had been all that had been involved here, I think the results would have been somewhat different. In addition to running against Senator Kennedy, we had the governor who was in it, and I think that some of the votes that went to him would probably have been mine. Plus the strength of the national labor organizations, which were in here asking people to vote for the governor as a stand-in for Senator Humphrey, so that in some ways I suppose the results here are inconclusive for everyone. They'll take some interpretation, but it was said I'd get 20%, probably 19%. and it looks as though I'll get approximately 30%, which is 50% better under these circumstances. I think we made a good showing.
You think that Governor Brannigan clouded the results by his entry? Will the situation be much different in Nebraska? I'm thinking particularly in terms of a debate with Senator Kennedy, which he did not agree to hear.
Well, he won't have quite the same excuse in Nebraska that he had here, and as far as I know, there'll be only 2 of us entered. And I hope that he would debate here, either with me alone or with the governor. I think that would have helped the kind of confrontation in which people could have made a choice between us. And I'm hopeful in Nebraska, without the 3rd candidate, that we may have 1 or 2 direct appearances so that people will have a real basis for comparison.
Well, now, Senator, it is often said by reporters that there's no difference in issues between yourself and Senator Kennedy. Once you even called it a horse show, I recall. Is that all there really is to this?
Well, there are some differences even in a horse show, you know. Questions of style and kind of projections to what the horse might really do if you put him to work. And I think that there are enough differences so that people will have some basis for a choice if we can give them a chance to make the comparisons, and I hope we can do that in Nebraska and Oregon and also in California.
David?
Senator,
David Shoemaker? I don't know whether you out there, you and Senator McCarthy, have had the results of the District of Columbia primary tonight. There, Senator McCarthy was not entered, but there were 2 slates pledged to Hubert Humphrey and 1 to Kennedy there. And on the basis of the returns we have up to this time, Senator Kennedy is leading with 60% of the vote. Hubert Humphrey's slate splitting the other 40%. I wonder, Senator McCarthy, how that looks to you. Kennedy has picked up 2 primaries tonight, it looks as if. Doesn't that give him quite a lot of momentum for the primaries ahead, Nebraska next week and so on?
Well, I don't know, Walter. How many do I have now? Have you counted them lately?
Yes, I've got them right here on my fingertips.
How many were there? Why did
4.
you give it? 4.
Right.
Plus, I won the college poll, so it seems I'm leading by 5 to 2 as of now, and the results here showed he didn't really get a majority of the delegates, or of the votes at least, so I don't see this as any very serious setback to my campaign at all.
Walter, in the few seconds remaining, one thing that occurred to me in watching Senator McCarthy's campaign for so many months, he'd said it had been based on student power and on poet power at one point, and more recently on harpsichord power. Think you're basing your campaign on the wrong things, perhaps?
No, I don't think so. As I look at the results in this election, as I expect they'll show, as they have showed in the other primaries, where in areas where I didn't do as well as I might have done, it generally shows that the votes that go to my opponents are votes that would go to almost any Democrat in a general election. The primaries are not simply matters of piling up delegates, not at this stage, but rather of demonstrating what your strength is as one who can win in November. And I think that the party leaders who come to Chicago, and I think maybe even some commentators a little later when they get done with the numbers game, will take a look at that. And this will be the judgment to be made in Chicago. And it seems to me that as things are building up, that unless the party is sure of victory next August, why, I'll probably still be the front runner as I now am.
Senator McCarthy, there is no question in your mind, then, but that in a race with a Republican, that you're the strongest candidate the Democrats could have.
I think that's the way it stands now. It may be the vice president can come on and show some strength, but I think that's what the polls tend to show, and that's certainly what the results of the primaries. I may have to look at this Indiana one a little more carefully tomorrow, but that's what they have been showing, and I see no reason for any change.
Senator, we'll be watching for the Nebraska returns now a week from tonight. When you go to that primary and on then to Oregon and California. Thank you very much, Senator McCarthy. Roger Mudd is right across the street over there with Senator Robert Kennedy. Roger?
Senator, we were just watching Senator McCarthy on the monitor claiming that he is still the front runner after tonight's results. What's your opinion of that claim?
I happen to be very pleased about what happened here in Indiana, and I'm very pleased about what happened in the District of Columbia. But I'd be less than candid if I didn't say this a long time until August. But I came here into the state of Indiana against all of the advice of every political leader in the state of Indiana. Ran against an incumbent governor who was very popular with a very strong political operation here in the state of Indiana, which everybody generally felt couldn't be defeated. And the polls showed that Senator McCarthy was running ahead of me amongst Democrats in the country. And then the polls on various networks and in the news magazines said that I was going to do a good deal worse here in the state of Indiana than evidently I have. So I'm pleased. I think it's better to win than to come second or third myself.
Well, now, some of your spokes...
And as I say, I think to do also well against Hubert Humphrey in the District of Columbia, win almost 2-1 there is a bright spot. But as I say, I think it's a long time between now and August.
Within an hour, some of your spokesmen said this was an impressive victory. I thought you had to come out of Indiana with 50% to call it impressive. Is that not accurate?
Well, I'd never heard that.
Well, I've seen it printed and not specifically denied by the Kennedy staff.
Well,
you're satisfied with this result tonight?
Yeah, I never heard that. I think that all of the predictions that were made at the time I came into this campaign, and before I even began the campaign, was the fact that I would be very lucky I mean, the great struggle was between Senator McCarthy and myself, and that Roger Brannigan, the governor, favorite son, was expected to win. I don't think anybody expected that I would do as well, really, as the vote showed that we did here.
Oh,
I think also the fact that the vote showed that we carried every major city in the state and did well amongst all groups within the state. I think is promising. As I say, I temper it by the fact that it's a long time between now and August and the Chicago Convention. But to come in here under these circumstances, against the advice of the political leaders and with all of the pollsters, for instance, on NBC, said just 2 nights ago that I wasn't going to get 37 or 38%, to be able to do this well is very encouraging.
Well, what do the results tonight tell you about yourself as a politician? I'm sure you must have been aware that the anti-Kennedy feeling was strong, at least measured by public opinion. Do you feel more confident about your own ability to go on?
Yes, I think there's an awful lot of talk about that in certain circles and certain certain parts of the United States, but I was treated very, very warmly in the state. And as I say, the governor won the state just a few years ago by 240 or 250,000, and to be able to defeat him, have the Indianapolis Star here in Indiana virtually cut me off completely as far as any fair news coverage, and also under the circumstances, it's very, very encouraging. As I say, until we get to Chicago, we're not going to know, but I'm going to take my candidacy to the people. I've gone to the small towns, and I've gone to the cities, and I'm going to go to all racial groups. I think we have major problems within our own country, and I'm hopeful that perhaps that I can do something about it. And the fact is that my candidacy had the support of those who formerly were antagonistic toward one another. For instance, up in Lake County, Indiana, of both groups, it has to be very, very encouraging.
Walter and Roger Mudd, this is David Shoemaker with Eugene McCarthy, just up the block from you. There's been a difficulty, of course, in staging any kind of a debate. I wonder if this time, if we could ask both men if they're willing to meet in the Nebraska primary and hold a confrontation of some sort, a joint appearance.
I don't know. That seems... You're talking to me now?
Right, sir. We'll ask you first.
Well, I don't know whether you ought to raise that question here tonight. I of course, have said that I was willing even in Indiana, and I've said I would in Nebraska. But it's, you know, we haven't really quite finished adding things up for tonight. I'm willing, yes. That's all right.
Senator Kennedy?
Yes, I've always said that I'm willing. I think that Vice President Humphrey is a candidate, and I would hope that he would enter this effort as well. As Senator McCarthy knows, Vice President Humphrey has made statements, and his backers and supporters have made statements that he's the front runner. Senator McCarthy feels that he's the front runner. I'm not making any predictions about where I am, because I think that the only way I can do well is obviously take my candidacy to the people and do well in the campaign with people. But I think it'd be very helpful for Vice President Humphrey to become actively involved in taking his campaign to the people themselves, because so that the people can pass on. And I think this is something more than just political leaders and politicians. I think this has to have the support of the people themselves, and I think that's what at least we're trying to do.
Can I squeeze in one last question? How much did the issue raised by the local press here and by McCarthy that you were trying to buy the election cost you. Can you measure that?
No, but again, I think that the fact is that our expenditures were not out of line. There were expenditures of about $550,000 or $600,000, which I think were in general line with the other campaigns. Secondly, where the expenditures go is to television. And we would all cut down, as Senator McCarthy would admit and agree, I'm sure. All of us would cut down 80% of our expenditures if television wasn't so expensive. If television would make all of this time available to all of us as a public service, then there wouldn't be any great expense in a political campaign. And at least to make it available at cost would seem to be a major step by the television networks and the television stations. Instead of in a political campaign to have the idea of making a profit from a political campaign. I think that they should make the time available for free, but if they're not willing to do that, at least to make it for cost, because I think that would be tremendously helpful.
Senator Kennedy, we're going to have to ask for equal time on our own air if you continue at this pace.
Yeah, but don't you think, Walter, there's been so much talk about that if we just start to analyze it and look at it ourselves, that's where the money goes. And that the money goes in advertising newspapers, and the two media who are critical about campaign expenditures are newspapers and television, yet they speak no words about their own role in it. And I think it is slightly hypocritical. It would be interesting, for instance, how much the networks have made from this political campaign, how much money they've taken in on it.
I'm not getting any of it.
No, but I don't think the networks are doing very well on this one. But
I just think that if we're going to talk about it, that I have traveled all over the state and have talked to all sections of the state and appeared in all sections of the state in small towns and large cities and tried to do the best that I could. As I say, I had difficulty here with the Indianapolis Star and the afternoon paper because they virtually blanketed me. So we have to turn to television. If television would cooperate and make this time available, it, of course, would make a major difference, and the expenses in a campaign would be changed dramatically. So I would hope that you would take that up with everybody, as long as we're talking about it. And I'm glad that you asked me the question, though.
I assume that Senator McCarthy would...
I was wondering if you're glad.
Well, no, I'm getting nervous, to tell you the truth. I assume that Senator McCarthy would endorse that position.
Well, I just say that I never really accused Senator Kennedy of buying the election here, Roger. There may have been some who did, but I didn't do that. And the other point is we could appear together on television. We could save half the money, anyway, if we're worried about time and money.
And we could get Vice President Humphrey.
Why is it necessary? Don't need three, really. We don't need three. Let it go.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Really didn't need us, Walter.
Beg your pardon?
You really didn't need us in this interview.
Yes, we do. We always need you, Roger. Thank you. Senator Kennedy won tonight in the northern state, which it might have been expected to be most hostile to him, as a matter of fact. Indiana has a strong tradition, as you probably know, of conservatism. There, the American Legion had as its national headquarters. The Ku Klux Klan was powerful in the 1920s, not to draw any comparison between those two organizations, of course. The John Birch Society was formed in Indiana in the 50s, all indicating the strong conservative trend at any rate. In 1960, anti-Catholicism, by all of the polls, contributed to a crushing defeat for John Kennedy there. In 1964, Alabama's George Wallace won 30% of the Democratic primary in Indiana. In addition, Kennedy faced that powerful old-line Democratic patronage machine. You know, it's been said of Hoosier politics that practices regarded as corrupt elsewhere have been accepted unquestioned in Indiana for years, even written into the law, a percentage return from state employees to their parties, for instance. In each county, the local party leader, as well, is set up as a director of auto and driver licensing, and part of that fee goes directly into the parties, not the state's coffers. The governor and the state organization control more than 8,000 patronage jobs. Each of those job holders this time was asked to contribute in the Brannigan campaign, and it was reported that one who refused was fired. Organized labor also has been a big factor in recent years in Hoosier politics, especially for the Democrats. The state AFL-CIO board decided to stay neutral in this primary race, but the big Indianapolis AFL-CIO and many locals came out for Brannigan. A strongly pro-Humphrey national labor leader sent many key figures into the state to work for the governor, leading to my remark a little earlier that the Brannigan supporters in many cases were identical to the Humphrey supporters in Indiana. About the only large union which held back was the United Auto Workers, which does lean to Kennedy. In a moment, we're going to take another look at the Indiana returns and what they mean.
Why was this house painted with brilliant colored stripes? To prove the amazing one-coat covering power of Sherwin-Williams' new Chem one-coat white house paint. Other paints may claim one-coat coverage, but Sherwin-Williams, the world's largest paint company, assures you absolutely that one coat of this new white house paint will cover any color when used according to directions. You get a brilliant white that can keep your home looking fresh and bright long after other houses have been repainted. This new paint costs $11.80 a gallon, yet it can be the most economical house paint you've ever used. Just one coat does the job, stays beautiful for years and years. New Sherwin-Williams Chem one-coat house paint. Take it from us, it'll paint circles around any other house paint. See? Available where you see this famous Cover the Earth trademark.
In Indiana's big primary today, with 45% of the vote in, Senator Kennedy has 41% of the vote, 163,000 votes. Brannigan, that's Governor Roger Brannigan, the favorite son, 29%, or 114,000 votes. And Senator Eugene McCarthy of Minnesota, 30% of the votes, 116, going on toward 117,000. CBS News estimate of the final result based on our sample precincts: Senator Kennedy will get 43% of the vote, Governor Brannigan 29%, and Senator McCarthy 28%. Well, that's the vote. Joseph Benty at our election analysis desk has been poring over those returns. Joe, what do you read in them?
Well, Walter, Senator Kennedy's strongest showing was in the big cities and among Negro voters. In almost exact proportion, that was where Senator McCarthy was weakest. The senator from Minnesota, for example, got only 1.5 of every 10 Negro votes, while Senator Kennedy was getting 6 of every 10. Kennedy's poorest showing was in the small cities and towns in the rural areas, especially in the southern section of the state. It was in those areas that Governor Roger Brannigan had most of his support. In fact, Brannigan held an edge over both Kennedy and McCarthy only among farmers and in the southern part of the state. Senator McCarthy's best showing came in areas where he probably least expected it, among working men, in sections of the state where there was a strong white backlash sentiment. There and among white-collar workers, McCarthy did best. If McCarthy did well in those areas, Senator Kennedy did surprisingly well, too. He ran ahead of McCarthy in most overall blue-collar districts, and he fell only slightly behind in those blue-collar areas where there was white backlash sentiment. Of all the candidates, tonight's returns probably will have the most meaning for Senator McCarthy. Once again, as in Wisconsin, the urban voters, especially the Negroes, proved to be McCarthy's Achilles heel. Walter?
On the Republican side of the ballot in Indiana's primary today, there was only one name, that of former Vice President Richard Nixon. With 46% of the vote in, he has 245,000 votes. It looks like he'll go on toward some 500,000 votes, which would be about 25% better than he did in the 1960 primary when he was virtually unopposed also in Indiana. There were no opposition, no write-ins permitted in Indiana, and Governor Rockefeller declared his candidacy too late to get on the Indiana ballot. We'll get Eric Severide's views on this election in a moment.
Watch this widely used spray cleaner on greasy dirt. Works pretty good, but see how fast it runs? That can cause streaking and extra work. That's why Ajax came up with a brand new idea for a spray cleaner, specially made to help protect against streaking. Ajax concentrates its power where the dirt is. Wipe, and it comes clean. So get Ajax spray cleaner, specially formulated to help protect against streaking.
For cellar to attic house cleaning, here's what we use. Handy wipes. Tough, all-purpose claws, soft as chamois. They wipe, dust, polish, work 1,000 ways. Marvelous for cleaning sooty dirt. Handy wipes rinse out cleaner. Won't smear that dirt around. Our windows prove that. Great for polishing, and they last and last. Less than a nickel each and machine washable. Nicest thing that's ever happened to house cleaning. Handy wipes.
Eric Severide, how do you size up the Indiana vote?
Well, Walter, obviously Richard Nixon and Robert Kennedy have every right to feel very good about tonight's results, but certainly McCarthy doesn't have to feel too badly about it. Kennedy has succeeded in firmly establishing himself now as a front runner in this first primary he's been in. It's his first elective test in a Midwest state. But perhaps the more significant fact is that he won so big in the big industrial cities, and that's what makes him look fairly formidable tonight. And this is not going to be lost on party leaders in the big industrialized non-primary states like Ohio or Illinois or Michigan. I would think in sum, Walter, it would seem reasonable to say that Kennedy has not been slowed down, McCarthy has not been stopped, and there's always Vice President Hubert Humphrey off in the wings, but very potentially formidable indeed.
And that's the Indiana primary. This is Walter Cronkite. Good night.
This has been a CBS News special, Campaign 68, the Indiana primary. The CBS News Hour continues with The Forgotten American.
To most Americans, indeed to most of the world, this is the American Indian, a dancing, chanting museum piece, a reminder of the drama of a once great new frontier. It makes pretty postcards and distorted history. This is not a pretty postcard, and it has been ignored by history. It is reality for most of America's 400,000 reservation Indians. Those he once called Great White Father still watch over him in poverty of body and spirit. He is the forgotten American.
The Forgotten American, with CBS News correspondent Joseph Benty, will return after this message.
That's it. Okay, Harry. Easy. Hold it.
If you're just starting out in business and need to haul around an awful lot of stuff, Volkswagen makes the squareback sedan. It's only 7 inches longer than the Bug. Our little squareback has enough room in the trunk up front and in the back to haul around just about anything you need. So if you're looking for a car that doesn't cost too much to buy and doesn't cost too much to run, try the Volkswagen Squareback Sedan. And for the price, consider it a steal.
The largest American Indian tribe is the Navajo, and most Navajos live on this reservation at Window Rock, Arizona, in an area larger than the state of West Virginia. Not even the government knows how many Navajos live here, but it's thought that about 125,000 Indians live on these 15 million acres of semi-arid plains and mountains that the late Indian historian Oliver Lafarge once said made the barren Gobi Desert seem like the Garden of Eden. Not only is the Indian's land barren, but by every other material standard, his life is barren. While most of the nation's attention has been drawn to the large urban ghettos and the plight of the Negro, most of the American Indians who live on reservations are at the very bottom of an economic heap that has more room at the middle and the top than ever before in history. While the federal government says a family income of $3,000 a year is the poverty level, the Indian family's income is half of that. For every 2 American children who die before they are 1 year old, 3 Indian children die. 3 times as many Indian children die before they are 4 years old. The Navajo suffers most from influenza, pneumonia, tuberculosis, and, as on many other Indian reservations, malnutrition. This Navajo child is being treated at the Public Health Service Hospital in Tuba City, on the edge of the Window Rock Reservation. At this hospital, 20% of the children admitted suffer severe nutritional disorders. The average American dies at 70, the average Indian at 45. Those who survive constantly live in danger of mental illness. Some form of mental disorder will strike 5 Indians for every 2 other Americans. For every young American suicide, 4 young Indians will die by their own hand. On some reservations, the Northern Cheyenne, for example, the suicide rate is several hundred times greater than the national average. Ted Mitchell, an anti-poverty lawyer who works with the Navajos.
It seems to me that the reservation is a federally created and perpetuated ghetto of poverty, lack of education, and in some instances misery, suffering. And it's all the more disturbing because the federal government is here to maintain it.
Compared to some other tribes, the Navajo are considered successful. Yet they struggle with problems as monumental as any undeveloped nation. More than half of these Navajo men have never held a full-time job. 95% of their hogans have neither running water nor electricity. Many of their children still wear clothing fashioned from flour sacks. Those are outward manifestations of poverty. But the poverty that takes a greater toll, the poverty that has scarred generations of Indians in the past, and may yet scar generations to come, is a poverty of spirit. The Navajo simply does not know who he is or where he belongs. The confusion begins early. Navajo children, whether in public schools, missionary schools, or boarding schools, like this one, run by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, are taught from a curriculum that is white and middle-class American. When they first come to this boarding school at age 6, these children speak little or no English. Once in school, they are forced to speak nothing but English. They are taught that Navajo is bad, Anglo is good. Leo Haven, grandson of one of the great Navajo chiefs, he who sings, is a product of these schools. He is a college graduate, now a social worker on the Navajo reservation.
I take it from personal experience. I went to a mission school and I went to Bureau of Indian Affairs school. When we were in the mission school, we were always told to just think the Anglo way, talk English all the time. For example, we used to be fined if we talked Navajo in our own language. Our teachers and people that work with us used to say that you shouldn't talk Navajo. You should forget the way you're living in Navajo. And this is the same connotation that they have in Bureau of Indian Affairs school, because I was just over to one of the big dormitory school and I talked to some of the students there, and I found out that the Bureau of Indian Affairs school personnel are telling the students not to talk Navajo. If they talk Navajo, they were punished for it. So I blame a lot the Bureau of Indian Affairs schools, the public, and the mission schools of making a Navajo a white man rather than retaining their culture.
The boarding school as an institution has been blamed for much of the Indians' problems. Most Navajo children spend 9 months of the year here without seeing their mothers and fathers. Some Navajo families, especially those in the more remote areas of the reservation, hide their children rather than send them off to these schools. Many of the older children habitually run away. Last winter, 2 of them froze to death trying to run all the way home during a storm. Critics of the system call the long separations barbaric and inhuman. Psychologists say these are the important formative years, that children need their parents more than ever at this stage. Social workers say that the end result of the boarding school system is a teenager who has learned to have no respect for tribal authority and who, because of his experience and confusion, cannot accept white authority. The Bureau of Indian Affairs says that because of the vast distances and few roads, it must, at least for now, have the boarding schools. Stuart Udall, Secretary of the Interior.
We had a big crash effort 15 years ago to get children in school, and we adopted a lot of programs that I think were harsh in terms of the human results. We're trying to correct these as rapidly as we can, but it's better to have a child in school, even though he is taken out of his home and is in a boarding school, than not have him in school at all.
Many Navajos dispute that premise. They claim it ignores other alternatives that should be considered in the face of some disturbing facts. About half of all Navajo children drop out before finishing high school. More alarming to adult Navajos is something that was unknown a few years ago: Navajo juvenile delinquency. With nothing to occupy their time, with part-time work out of the question in a community where most adults cannot find any work, the teenage Navajo, frustrated and aimless, torn between the tribal way and the Anglo way, has begun to turn to vandalism, violence, stealing, and alcohol. Although liquor cannot legally be sold on the reservation, it is evident and prevalent. Tribal police say that 1 of every 2 adult males on this reservation will be arrested at least once a year for drunkenness. The Indians' inability to handle alcohol is legendary, but some psychiatrists say it may be the lesser evil, that if the Indian did not find some relief in a bottle of cheap wine, the pressures of his life might push him to violence, psychosis, or suicide.
Baseball champions need raw power. It takes slashing, hard-hitting power to win. And the power to win starts with Wheaties, because Wheaties give you the basics of raw wheat: crude protein, natural sugars, potent wheat germ, vitamins, and iron. So pour on the Wheaties, splash on the milk, enjoy every great-tasting bite. For the power to win, get Wheaties, breakfast of champions.
Sometimes, the only way to make a new friend is to bribe him. Bugles are good for that. Bugles are love, truth, beauty, corn, and a little salt.
Deeper than all of the Indians' personal confusion is a constant fear of the United States government, the white man's authority, whose presence is everywhere in the form of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. It employs 17,000 people and has an annual budget of almost $250 million. First established 134 years ago in the War Department, since moved into the Department of the Interior, the Bureau's early mission was to negotiate and regulate trade between the new nation and the many Indian nations. As the white nation moved west, the red nations were pushed aside, often brutally. Indian lands were stolen, crops and livestock destroyed, whole villages wiped out. In some instances, Indian children were kidnapped and enslaved. Others, the children of chiefs, were forcibly removed to special schools. Most of the Indian nations retaliated, and a bloodbath began, one that spared neither side, but eventually cost the Indian his freedom and his pride. By the late 19th century, peace came to the frontier. Defeated red nations had been moved to reservations, and what to do with them became a dilemma. Most of the early Indian commissioners said, assimilate. Teach the Indian the white man's ways and bring him into the growing society.
One commissioner, Francis Leop, disagreed. In 1905, he said, we must learn to measure the Indian by his own standards, as we whites would wish to be measured. Leop also suggested that the Indian be encouraged to deposit his money in local banks and to shop in local market towns instead of with what he called the obsolescent licensed trader.
63 years later, that obsolescent white trader still is very much a part of the reservation. This trading post at Piñon, Arizona is one of 105 such posts on the Navajo reservation. Only one is owned by an Indian. This one has been in the same family for more than 100 years. Licensed by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, approved by a tribal council, the trader sells everything from water cans to coffee, livestock to yard goods. The Navajo pays more for what he buys here than he would pay at almost any market off the reservation. Traders say they charge higher prices because they must truck in their supplies over a long distance, and that Indians are bad credit risks. When CBS News visited this trading post, a carton of cigarettes cost $5. Off the reservation, a carton cost $2.80. Eggs at the trading post were $1.30 a dozen. Coffee, $2 a pound. These prices are high to most Americans. They're even higher for large families whose income averages only $1,500 a year. Many who visit this reservation ask why the Navajo continues to deal at the trading posts. The obvious answer is convenience. But more than that, after a century of exclusivity, the trading post has become post office, check casher, loan company, pawn shop, and social center. And for the large number of adult Navajos who cannot read or write, it is easier and less embarrassing to continue their lifetime habit of dealing at the trading post than going into nearby towns. Even if the Indian wanted a change, the trading post system has become one of the reservation's most permanent institutions. Lawyer Ted Mitchell.
The trader is the post office. He's the only source of mail. And that means welfare checks, railroad retirement checks, old age assistance, you name it. And they come to the trader. The Navajo's already spent that check in advance at where he gets book credit from the trader, gets goods at inflated prices and inferior quality. So in the exchange, he always loses. The trader always wins. And a good trader, meaning a trader who can manage all the business in the trading area, makes a great amount of money. Great amount.
By nature and tradition, the Navajo has lived off his land. Land always too dry to farm and not good for much of anything other than an occasional small herd of cows or a few scrawny sheep. The Navajo child learns about the land and its demands early. The Navajo child is taught never to complain. Like most Indians, the Navajos deeply respect nature, no matter how savagely it may treat him. To the Navajo, nature is sacred. Bob Davis, descendant of a Seneca chief.
The Indian, by his nature, is pantheistic. He finds his God in nature. The Indian looks at a mountain, and he says, "Mountain, how can I live with you?" The non-Indian looks at the mountain and says, "Mountain, I'm going to change you." The Indian loves the stream as it is. The non-Indian dams up the stream and then has to turn around and hire a conservation department to correct all that he has done. The Indian thinks this is ludicrous and insane.
This acceptance of nature in all her forms has done much to create the Navajo's problems, to keep him where he is, uncomplaining. But the pressure of reality is pushing him harder and harder. His birth rate is greater than ever before in his history, and his children are surviving in greater numbers despite the odds. This means that work must be found, an economy must be created. The Indian must create his own economy because, contrary to popular misconception, he is not a public ward. The government does not feed, clothe, or house him. One possible answer to the Indian's economic needs is the attraction of industry to the reservation. William Byler, director of the Association on American Indian Affairs.
It makes good business sense to move onto a reservation. There's a high-quality workforce there, a very stable workforce, and firms that have moved to the reservations have found that it's profitable to have an Indian workforce.
So ideally, as far as you're concerned, you would like to see industry move to the reservation and the Indians stay on the reservation?
Yes, and I think that this is what, there's a dovetailing of interests here, because the manufacturer would like to see the Indians stay on the reservation too. It makes a very stable workforce where a man, if he's trained by a company, will stay at a job 10, 20, 30 years. Instead of, as in the urban setting, where the transiency of the workforce is very high, it's very expensive for a manufacturer to train a man and lose him 3 months later. So for the Indians' best interest is to develop their reservations, and this fits very nicely in with the interests of the manufacturer.
Few firms have tried the reservation experiment. Those that have, like General Dynamics, which completed this multi-million-dollar plant on the Navajo Reservation a few months ago, claim they like the results. Eventually, 500 Indians will work here. Within 2 years, General Dynamics hopes to have trained enough Indians to run the entire plant. Yet, even if 5 more plants were located at Window Rock within the next year, there would still be almost 50% unemployment. And perhaps even more frustrating, most of those now employed are women. Their husbands usually are at home without jobs. As in the Negro ghettos, when the mother becomes the breadwinner and the family boss, the father sinks into depression. He drinks or disappears to save his self-respect. The Bureau of Indian Affairs believes one answer to the reservation unemployment problem is relocation. Graham Holmes is area director for the BIA.
Our population increase here is about 3.4%, which is about 1.5% above the national average, and it's high. So I think we will be of necessity a people exporting area for some years to come. There won't be enough jobs provided here by any means to provide for all the people that will be born and will grow up here.
Nobody knows how many Indians already have relocated in cities. The best estimate is at least 200,000. The city Indian is almost an invisible man who has formed small, obscure ghettos in places like Denver, St. Louis, and Los Angeles. Most Chicagoans, for example, probably do not know that 16,000 Indians, 800 of them Navajos, are wedged into a few square blocks between the luxury houses on Lakeshore Drive and an area populated by migrants from the Appalachian region. Jess Sixkiller, an Oklahoma Cherokee, is a detective on the Chicago Police Force.
The Bureau of Indian Affairs is bringing a lot of Indians to Chicago and other large cities on their relocation program, and they're bringing them here physically, but they're not bringing them here mentally. They're not preparing them prior to coming here. They're not showing them that, you're going to meet people that aren't exactly scrupulous. You're going to meet people that are there to attempt to take advantage of you if you let them. And there's a million problems that they run into. And
are the Indians taken advantage of especially by the people? Are the rents are they super high?
Well, now there again is the problem of the Indians voicing the problem. If we could get the Indians to speak up when they're wrong, then we could give you an indication of as to the question that you asked. But as it is, the Indians accept it and they continue to live the best they can.
Like most other migrants to big cities, the Indian is lured by the promise of a job and a better life. He usually finds neither. At best, he can be a day laborer, getting in line before dawn at any one of several hiring halls. Eventually, some do find good jobs. But for most, a job or any other blessing of a big city cannot change the fact that the Indian has not been trained, nor is he suited for city life. The lure of his home is too great. The young man in the yellow shirt is Pete Eagle, a Chippewa from Wisconsin. He has come to Chicago 3 times in the past 2 years. He returned to his reservation 3 times, and he plans to go back again, saying, "The cement prairie is not for me." Half of the Indians who leave the reservation for the city eventually go back to the reservation, and back to the life that has made them the forgotten Americans. In a moment, a final comment.
Let's take a close look at a new padded bra by Playtex. It's the closest thing to you yet. See? Playtex put a new softer fiber inside. It's just like natural softness. Stays soft, can't shift, can't bunch up, even after machine washing. So it always stays soft and natural. It's the closest thing to you yet. New Playtex Softline Padded Bra.
When babies feed with ordinary bottles, air gets inside. Nipple often collapses. Air gets into baby's stomach. Not with Playtex, the nursing method most like mother herself. See, natural-shaped nipple can't collapse because as baby feeds, formula sac contracts. No air gets inside. Formula flows smoothly. Baby gets less air, more nourishment. And Playtex nurser sacs are pre-sterilized, disposable. Playtex nurser, the nursing method most like mother herself.
It has been said of the American Indian that he is an alien in his own land. As his plight is revealed, often it inspires thoughts of charity and handouts, and even more of the nearly paralyzing government paternalism which so often suffocates the Indian and his hopes. Seldom is a response directed to the ways of bringing the Indian to the more complicated, long-range possibility of self-government and independence. We have talked of the Navajo, the largest Indian nation, but there are at least 200 others. Each is unique. Each has its own language, its own heritage, its own culture, its own limitations, and its own ambitions. Here and there, some have successfully assimilated into American life. Since World War I, the Indian's loyalty to the United States has been tested many times, often in the blood of its young men. That loyalty has never been questioned. Today, despite some effective organizations and an occasional young Indian's call for red power, the majority of reservation Indians are strangely inarticulate. In that silence, there are whites who rush in to supply articulate answers, though in the long run, even that may not really help the Indian. Perhaps the best Indian policy is the one we noted earlier, proposed in 1905 by then Indian Commissioner Francis Lea. He said, "We must learn to measure the Indian by his own standards, as we whites would wish to be measured." In short, it seems clear that we cannot help the Indian until we can accept the fact that he has the right to be an Indian. Folk singer Buffy St. Marie is a member of the Cree Indian tribe.
There's something wrong with the country that supposedly is set up like this one. When we say, you can have dark skin, but you may not be a Negro. You can have a good tan, but you can't be an Indian in here and here. You see, we'll let you go to our schools, provided you do it our way. See, that's not right. Very often I have kids coming to me after the concerts. They want to go and live with the Indians. This is nothing new, you know. That's happened a lot. But I think that there's a great deal that the Indians have to give to the white people. Not beads and feathers and songs, you know, that too, but a way of life that would really make the world a better place, I think.
Buffy St. Marie has put her feelings to song.
Can you remember the times that you have held your head high and told all your friends of your Indian claim? Proud good lady and proud good man, your great-great-grandfather from Indian blood sprang, and you feel in your heart for these ones. It's all in the past, you can say, but it's still going on here today. The government now wants the Iroquois land, the land of the Chippewa and the Cheyenne. It's here and it's now, you must help us, dear man, now that the buffalo's gone.
This broadcast has been brought to you by Playtex Baby Nurser, the natural way to feed your baby. Playtex Baby Nurser.
Watch the bright new hour of comedy and variety, The Dom DeLuise Show, tomorrow night at 10, 9 Central Time, in color on CBS.